The boy slipped Lieutenant a secret note. He read it and immediately called for backup. This story about the courage of a little boy will warm your hearts. When this young boy slipped a note into a lieutenant's hand, and the lieutenant immediately pulled out his phone and called for help, no one could have guessed what would have happened next. This story follows the life of a 10-year-old boy called Luke. He lived in a small but loving home with his mother. His mother was a single mom who worked hard as possible to make ends meet. She would wake up at 6 a.m. to get herself and Luke ready for school, drop him off, and then make her way to her first job. After school, Luke would take the bus home and have food waiting for him that his mom had made after that morning. He was a delightful son who never got into trouble or made his mom worry about him alone. After his meal, he would either quietly watch some TV or read his comic books or do his homework until his mom got home. At 6 p.m., Christine, Luke's mom, would arrive home from work. She would spend time with her son, helping him with his homework or just hanging out with him. She made sure he was cleaned up and then in bed by 9 or 10 p.m. Christine would go out again and work for a 5-hour shift until 3 a.m. Although she was exhausted, she always loved working the night shift because they paid more money. Every night she worried as she left her 10-year-old son at home. She would silently return before 4 a.m. and crawl into bed, catching a couple of hours sleep before she had to be up all over again. Meanwhile, Luke was the best son ever. He knew how hard his mother worked and would help her around the house as much as he could. He would clean up after himself, wipe down surfaces, and help load the dishes into the dishwasher. Luke also enjoyed sorting out laundry by color, organizing all the books on the shelves. Sometimes Christine felt how many chores Luke had to do. She wished he could play all day and not have to worry about such things. The young boy never complained. However, he took pride in his chores and did it because it felt good to help his mom. On one particular day, Luke was back from school and watching TV, waiting for his mom to come home. He expected nothing different from this day. It was a usual routine, but when he saw the look on his mom's face when she came home, he knew something was wrong. Christine looked pale, almost like she'd seen a ghost when she walked through the doors. Her shoulders were slumped and her brow was furrowed, and her son noticed a change in her demeanor immediately. He rushed over to her, helping her with her bags and leading her into the living room and onto the couch. The poor woman looked like she had been defeated, as if she had just received the worst news of her entire life. And indeed she just had, because she took a deep breath and sighed. The news that she was about to break to her son would make sure that it was one of the worst days of his life. She sat him down and looked him in the eyes, grabbing his 2 hands. Christine took a deep breath and started talking. She had cancer. She tried not to scare her poor son with the details, but she thought it was the right thing to tell him, telling him the truth. It was breast cancer and that the doctors told her it wasn't a good prognosis. The poor son broke down into a pool of tears and wrapped his arms around his mom, burying his face in her embrace, staining her shirt with his tears. Christine was overcome with emotions as she squeezed Luke back lovingly and promised that she would do everything and anything she could to fight the illness. She also broke the news to him that would mean for him financially. She explained that the treatments would be very expensive, plus she would be sick, she wouldn't be able to work as much, and that meant less money. Christine sounded frustrated as she said everything out for Luke. She wished she could give her son anything he wanted, as if it wasn't bad enough that she was sick. She didn't want to be poor too. She thought to herself, because although she and her son might not have much, she never wanted Luke to lack anything. The poor young man saw the sadness on his mother's face as he went back to hug her again, reassuring her that everything would be fine. His mother mentioned one more thing. She told him that this Christmas year might not be the one they planned. Christine had been saving money away for a special Christmas trip for her and her son. They had a big countdown calendar and a vision board on the living room wall of a beach paradise in the Bahamas. It was the poor boy's breaking point. Fresh tears streamed down his face as he grew sadder with disappointment. This vacation had been their dream for so long. His mom had worked so hard to save up for it. He had been doing errands around the neighborhood to help out, but all of this money had to go to her treatment. Even if they had the money, his mother might be too sick to travel. Luke hugged his mom one last time, reassuring her that he loved her and that things would be okay. That night, the young boy lay in bed. He was riddled with anxiety and fear. What would happen to him if his mother died? He had no family members that he knew of. He didn't want his mother to worry about him when she was supposed to be getting better. With all these thoughts in his head, the young boy finally fell asleep. In class the next day, Luke was distracted. He was sad and distraught, but did not want to tell anyone what was wrong. He sat in the back of the class and rested his hands and head on the table. His teachers tried to engage him in the lessons, but he was not interested. At lunchtime, Luke did not want to sit with his friends because they would figure out that he was sad and would ask him what was wrong, and he didn't want to discuss what was happening at home. So the young boy took his backpack and headed to the solitude of the library. He sat in the back of the library where the reading nooks were. His teary eyes scanned the tall shelves until his eyes caught the cracked spine of a yellow book. He picked it up and scanned the cover. Business Guide for a Young Entrepreneur, it read. Luke had heard about that word before, so he sat back down and started reading the thin pages of the book. He got out his notebook and scribbled down anything he thought that might be important. He felt a little better as he flipped through the pages of that book. After school, Luke was supposed to go straight home, just like he always did. He knew his mom would be not at home until late in the evening, so he decided to do something he knew his mom would be angry at him for, but he didn't mind. He might get punished for it now, but he wanted to go and do it. His backpack swooshed and the sound of papers rustled inside. He had printed and photocopied some papers in the library at school and stuffed them into his bag. He didn't get off the bus when it pulled up to his stop. Instead, he remained seated and scanned the houses as they passed by. When the bus stopped at the mall, Luke grabbed his belongings hastily and ran off the bus. He had never gone to the mall by himself, but he knew how to navigate the big shopping center. He followed the crowd of people headed towards the entrance, and this was ideal for what he was about to do. By the time he got inside the building, the noise of the busy shoppers and the smell of the food stalls filled the air. Luke scanned the stores and looked for a good spot where people were coming and going. He walked a bit further until he saw even more people. Their hands were filled with shopping bags. All he could think about was Christmas. He was sure all the things in the shopping bags were for that special day. The boy pulled out the papers he had printed from in school and started handing them out to strangers. Many of them ignored him, but some took the papers and barely glanced at it before shoving it into their pockets or into their shopping bags. Just then, a tall, slender man that was walking by. He was smartly dressed with his t-shirt tucked into his trousers and neatly pressed. Luke walked up to him and handed him one of his papers. The man looked surprised at the gesture. He glanced over at the child and then his eyes rested on the paper. He stopped in his tracks, scanning the printed words, immediately pulled out his phone and called someone. "I'm going to need your help," he said. Luke was still at the mall handing out papers. He had almost finished the stack he had printed. His plan was surely going to work. Luke had read in the book from this library that every entrepreneur needed to have a business proposal, so he wrote one. It was called Saving Christmas. In his proposal, Luke writes how his mother had been diagnosed with cancer. He writes about how much she works and how hard she's been struggling. All he wants is to give her a good Christmas because it would be her last. The book Luke read also said once you have a proposal, you need to get a target market, and you need to share this data with that audience, just like a survey. So Luke had photocopied his proposal and was handing it out at the mall just like the book said. He hoped his business proposal to save Christmas would work. Meanwhile, the man who was handed one of Luke's proposals and had called a friend when he read the words on the page. The man had called Jared, and he was a decorated lieutenant in the army. He was off duty and was at home for the holidays. When he read Luke's proposal, he was so moved by the boy's bravery and determination to help his mom that he knew he had to be a part of it. He called all of his friends in the army and told them that he had an exciting project for them. After Jared made the calls, he turned back and searched for the young boy. He saw Luke putting on his backpack after handing out the last of his business proposals. Jared walked quietly back to the boy before he lost him in the sea of people. He stopped him right on time. Luke seemed surprised by the abrupt interruption, but stared eagerly at the tall man. Jared introduced himself to Luke, and the two got to talking. He told Luke that he had seen the proposal and he wanted to invest in his business of saving Christmas. Luke was filled with so much joy because he hoped that this would work. The lieutenant gave Luke his phone number and told him to call when he could so we could discuss the business. Luke got home that evening full of glee and hope. He was happy his business proposal had a good response. He could be happy if he could get a $100 investment from that nice man. That way he could buy his mom whatever she wanted. As Luke opened the door to his home, and he was met with a very angry and worried face. His mother had come home early from work and had been frantically trying to call him. She was in full panic mode. She demanded to know where he had been and why he wouldn't answer the phone. Luke felt guilty for making his mother worry, and even worse, because he was about to lie to her about what he had been doing. He told her that he had stayed late at school to do some work and then he had gone to the park for a bit. He had never told such a lie to his mom before, but he knew it was for a good reason. His mom didn't believe him completely, but she was exhausted and just glad that he was okay, though that she let it go and let him go to his room. Meanwhile, Jared had, of course, already set up plans in motion to help out this kid. He went home that evening, and he and his army friends began to plan what they could do for Luke and his mom. The boy called him when he got home and thanked him again for being interested in his business idea. Jared said it was no problem and he was happy to help. Jared told Luke that he would be in touch with him very soon and that he shouldn't worry. Weeks went by and the young boy had not heard anything back from Jared, and he started to give up hope that this plan to save Christmas would work. In a few days, it would be Christmas, and he still didn't have any money for his mom. Just then, there was a knock on the door, and Luke and his mother were home, so they both walked up to the door. Whose love and bravery made all of this possible.